Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Today we are fishing for secrets from the original inspiration behind the legend of Atlantis to the secret undersea bases that might be hiding all over the world. Plus, a shocking artifact found in the wreckage of the Titanic. Are you ready? Let's go. The city and the Forbidden Lake. There is a city at the bottom of a lake in China. Deep beneath the surface of Fujian Lake in China lies a mysterious ancient ruin. Discovered in 2006, the sheer scale of these ruins is shocking. Sonar surveys show that the structures sprawl across millions of square feet. They are huge. Archaeologists believe the city might date back thousands of years, but its origins remain a mystery. Could this be the lost capital of an ancient kingdom? Was it swallowed by the lake in a natural disaster? Or is there another explanation? Chinese authorities have restricted access to the site for regular people, only making this discovery more mysterious. In 2006, a group of divers/aquatic archaeologists were allowed to go investigate the lake and see what was really going on here. The investigative team that dove into the lake initially came across regularly placed stones along the lake bed. These stones were clearly made by someone, not by nature. They were inscribed with strange images and symbols. As the team continued to search through the murky depths, they kept finding more and more pieces of architecture that were obviously built by civilized human beings. This discovery came as a big surprise to archaeologists because nobody had known there was an entire sunken city here. After the dive, the team started looking through historical records and located a place called Dunwich. The record said it was established in the area Fujian Lake around 206 BC, but that was about it. By the time the Tang dynasty began, more than 1,000 years later, all mention of Yu Yuan in the historical records was gone. There are no written texts saying what happened to the city. There are only local legends that say the city and its people sank to the bottom of the lake. This is one of those cases where legends might be helpful. Maybe they can combine their dives with the legends and see if anything fits. At first, they thought maybe the sunken city of Yuan had been the capital of the Dian Kingdom more than 2,000 years ago. But as always, there are doubts. For one, the city is ridiculously big. Sonar surveys have shown that the architecture is spread along the bottom of the lake for more than 10.8 million square feet. It's larger than the capital of the ancient Han Dynasty. This sunken complex of ruins is so extensive that it seems to defy all logic. A city this big could not have gone undocumented. It would be as if somehow the city of Rome in ancient times never made it into the history books. It's just not realistic. Things get even more confusing when you learn that there is a submerged pyramid at the bottom of Fujian Lake. Those who are familiar with the structure have claimed it to be more advanced than the Egyptian pyramids. Not because it's bigger, but because its stones are decorated with curious designs and mystical symbols. These blocks with carvings were definitely important, if only we understood what they meant. One of the engraved stones is particularly interesting. On the top right corner of the stone is a small circle. It has 7 lines radiating out of it. The carving looks like the sun. And then on the other side of the stone is a similar circle, but it only has 4 lines radiating out of it. This is very exciting if you're familiar with ancient Chinese symbolism. These types of sun designs have been found drawn on bronze drums from China's spring and autumn period from between 722 and 481 BC. But the stone symbol is far older than that, going back almost 5,000 years. It likely originated with Stone Age cultures in China, cultures who potentially worship the sun. Scientists have been trying to decipher these symbols found all over the lake bed and see if they can find out if they can tell us anything. Could the city really be 5,000 years old? If they aren't that old, they might be at least 1,700 years old, which is also not too shabby. Scientists have no idea. They don't even know what the symbols and carvings mean. They don't know what the pyramid was built for or if there are some lost Chinese rulers buried underneath it. It's been nearly 20 years since the investigation, and there hasn't been much more information released about it. The rumor going around now is that China shut down Fujian Lake and restricted all archaeological investigations. They have allegedly restricted all diving, period. But why? What are they trying to hide? The legend of Atlantis solved. Scientists believe they have just found the place that started the whole legend of Atlantis. They found a mountain that sank underneath the sea just off the coast of the Canary Islands. If what they say is true, the sunken mountain could have been the beginning of it all. The islands were discovered on a seamount, also known as an underwater mountain. The mountain has 3 inactive volcanoes on it. It's huge, about 31 miles in diameter. I mean, it has to be huge if it has 3 volcanoes surrounded by beaches. Did you know there even were beaches underwater? Scientists led by Luis Somoza, a leading expert in volcanic activity in the Canary Islands, believe they may have stumbled upon the inspiration for the legendary Atlantis. Scientists have even named it Mount Los Atlantes after the legendary civilization. You know, the one Plato claimed was sent to their watery doom when they defied the gods. What's crazy is just how old Los Atlantes is. Scientists say the mountain would have originally been a series of islands 56 million years ago during the Eocene period. The mountain was so high above sea level that the parts that poked from the surface became tropical isles. For a modern comparison, just look at the Hawaiian Islands. They too were made from volcanic activity. The beaches and palm trees wouldn't exist if not for the volcanoes that also threatened to destroy them. It's a delicate balance between creation and destruction. 34 million years ago, Los Atlantes volcanoes stopped erupting. When that happened, the lava that had been spewing out became dense and the island started to sink. The whole mountain began to sink very, very slowly. Los Atlantes is still sinking right now. Scientists found some beaches from the ancient islands that are just 200 feet below the surface. During the Ice Age, when sea levels were way lower, the inactive volcanoes would have been islands just as they were 56 million years earlier. The islands would have been home to all kinds of life, and maybe even an advanced civilization of humans. There was plenty of land, plenty of food, and plenty of opportunity for a pre-flood civilization to prosper. Then, disaster struck at the end of the Ice Age. Sea levels rose just like they did 34 million years ago. The beaches and islands of Los Atlantes were returned to the sea. And sadly, whatever was living on the islands also was forced into the sea. If there had been prehistoric creatures, they would have gone extinct. If there had been a civilization, perhaps like Atlantis, they would have been wiped out. The sea levels rose around the same time Plato claimed Atlantis sank, which was roughly 12,000 years ago. Do you know what else happened 12,000 years ago? It was the same time the ancient astronomers of Göbekli Tepe recorded a comet impact, which may have triggered a global flood. It was the same time the Bible claims God sent a flood to destroy the Nephilim and the corrupted humans. This could explain why every civilization has an ancient flood myth, and perhaps it all began off the coast of the Canary Islands. The oceans are boiling. Scientists have found something extremely alarming 13,000 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. It's a zone full of acidic water, and it's terrifying. It isn't just sort of acidic, it is fatally acidic. The zone's high pressure and low temperature has created conditions so inhospitable to life that the water dissolves shells and skeletons. If you tried to swim through the acidic zone, your skin would melt. Sometimes animals will accidentally swim into it and turn themselves into instant skeletons. I haven't even gotten to the scariest part yet. The scariest part is so frightening that you might be afraid to go swimming after this. Scientists are saying this mysterious acidic zone is getting bigger, a lot bigger. By 2100, it could be so big that it makes up half of the global ocean. Half of all oceans in the world could turn to bubbling pits of acid. What kind of planet will we even be living on if that happens? They'll be like we're on one of Saturn's moons or Venus or something. Life as we know it will cease to exist. Scientists have come up with a name for the zone. It's called the carbonate compensation depth. And in case you were wondering, it is not the same as the ocean acidification that is happening on the surface. As the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from burning of fossil fuels, surface waters are beginning to acidify as well. Scientists have been talking about it for years, but no one realized the same thing was happening deep in the ocean as well. The two things are likely connected. The rise in concentration of carbon dioxide in the ocean is decreasing the pH level. This is helping the deeper areas to become more acidic. To give you an idea of just how much the acidic zone is expanding, it has risen 980 feet in some parts of the Atlantic. If the zone continues to rise, it could occupy 51% of the global ocean. I don't want you to panic, but things are starting to look a little scary in the deep seas. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to Rose Casanova and Plan Petkov in Bulgaria for supporting this channel. Hi guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. A Mississippi mammoth. A gigantic mammoth tusk was recently found sticking out of a stream in Mississippi. I can't even find words to describe how big the tusk is. The fact that nobody saw it sticking out of the muddy water before is amazing. The tusk was found by someone who desperately wanted to find one. Amateur fossil hunter Eddie Templeton was taking a walk in rural Madison County in early August 2024, exploring the stream. The water had come down quite a bit, and he spotted the tusk right near a cliff. This was a groundbreaking discovery because it is the first time any kind of mammoth fossil has been unearthed in the area, so it's kind of a big deal. If you've ever wondered what to do in case you come across a giant fossil one day, don't just start digging it up. Instead, do what this guy did. Instead of attempting to excavate the tusk himself, he contacted the Mississippi State Geological Survey. With the help of experts, massive tusk was carefully removed from the silt and clay of the stream. According to the survey scientists, the ivory tusk is 7 feet long and weighs 600 pounds. 600 pounds is crazy heavy for one tusk. Imagine how big and strong the animal had to be. It was longer than most human beings are tall, unless you know more 7-foot-tall people than I do. The tusk belonged to a Columbian mammoth, scientific name Mammuthus columbi. While Mississippi was once home to these magnificent creatures, their remains are relatively uncommon. Most of the fossils are from the more adaptable mastodons. Mastodons were gigantic plant eaters who could graze on pretty much anything. They were very unlike mammoths, who were extremely picky eaters. During the Columbian mammoth's time in North America, from 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, they would only graze in open grasslands. Even though mammoths and mastodons lived in Mississippi, mammoths stuck to a very specific territory. This is why it's so tough to find mammoth remains in Mississippi, whereas mastodon bones are a dime a dozen. By the way, did you know that mammoths arrived in North America the same way as the first humans? Only they did it a little bit earlier. Mammoths crossed the Bering Land Bridge connecting Siberia to Alaska 1.5 million years ago. The animals could grow 15 feet tall at the shoulder while weighing upwards of 10 tons. Shortly after humans arrived in North America, taking the same land bridge from Siberia, Columbian mammoths went extinct. Scientists don't think that this was a coincidence. The very last known mammoths survived in small family herds on Russia's Wrangel Island until 3,700 years ago. The legendary London warship. After spending 360 years at the bottom of England's Thames estuary, a bronze cannon has been seen for the first time since the 1600s. It was discovered by archaeologist Steve Ellis from Historic England. Steve thinks the cannon was part of a 17th century warship, not just any warship. Steve said the cannon came from the London, a warship that played a significant role in England's history. Its name is kind of confusing, but the ship was named the London. The London was built in 1654 at the Chatham Dockyard when England was in political turmoil. The English Civil War had just ended in 1648, and the Anglo-Dutch War had ended earlier in the year. Once the London was ready for service, it was introduced into the convoy that brought Charles II back from his exile in the Netherlands in 1660. Charles was then put back on the English throne. The London may have been a legendary warship, but it didn't have a very long life. In 1665, there was a gunpowder accident. The powder magazine accidentally ignited and the boat exploded. It really exploded! The whole thing went up like a car crash in a Fast and Furious movie. Bits and pieces of it sank into the Thames estuary near Southend Pier. A lot of people died. The explosion was a major catastrophe and a huge humanitarian crisis. 300 crew members were killed, most of them instantly as they were engulfed in the explosion. However, there were a few lucky survivors. 24 men were hit by the initial shockwave with such force that they were blown clear of the explosion and survived. Plus, one woman was saved by the blast. Ever since that fateful day, the ship has lain in two halves on the seabed, its treasures scattered through the silt and sand. The newly found cannon is being hailed as one of the most significant artifacts ever discovered at the wreck. It's a medium-sized demi-cannon, one that historians were able to trace back to its maker, George Brown. The cannon was bigger than a culverin but smaller than the 42-pound cannons on some ships. It would have been placed on the lower gun deck and used to absolutely destroy naval foes with deadly cannonballs. Fingerprints from the Iron Age. Archaeologists have gone full CSI. Divers found a statue at the bottom of a lake that is 3,000 years old. When archaeologists investigated the statue, they found fingerprints on it. Before digging too deeply into the statue, I have to take you back to 1991. That was when divers started to realize there was something going on underneath Italy's Lake Bolsena. Divers started finding piles of stone that looked oddly artificial. Then they started finding wooden poles, ceramic fragments, and evidence of villages. It became clear that humans used to live under the lake. Maybe not under it, but definitely in the lake before it was flooded. In the 9th century BC, Lake Bolsena had a much lower water level. The edges of the lake were populated by towns of Iron Age humans. But the water level kept rising. Archaeologists have found evidence of a civilization on the run. There were primitive settlements that consisted of huts right next to the shore. As the water rose, the huts grew stilts. The villagers wanted to keep living right on the water, but flooding must have become a problem. Their solution was to start building their houses on stilts. Then, when things grew too dire, the people abandoned the lake and their settlements altogether. The statue found at the bottom of the lake was shaped by a member of this forgotten civilization. It has sat unfinished in the water since the 9th century BC. I say unfinished because archaeologists think the clay worker didn't complete their little piece of art. The artist must have gotten frustrated and thrown it into the water. Either that or the figurine was swept away in a flood before the artist could finish all the features. It was intended to be a small statue of a woman, but it's not fully formed. The spectacular part is that the claymaker's fingerprints are still pushed into the clay. It's not too often researchers find the fingerprints of someone who lived in a prehistoric village, and definitely not imprinted on a work of art the person never finished. The Las Vegas of Rome. A team of underwater archaeologists have found a beautiful marble floor in the ruins of an ancient holiday city. The floor is stunning, but it's only a piece of the story. The bigger tale involves the sunken city of Baiae and its fall from grace. For hundreds of years, if you were a wealthy Roman citizen who wanted to let off a bit of steam, you went down to the city of Baiae. Modern historians have called it the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire. It was part seaside resort, part all-inclusive vacation destination. Famous Roman leaders like Cicero, Hadrian, and Julius Caesar spent time in luxury villas here. This place was so rich that its streets were lined with expensive villas. You would have been hard-pressed to find a better, more extravagant city to spend your Roman coins. There was a rejuvenating volcanic hot spring, which people believed to have magical healing properties. Over the years, the hot springs became a little less family-friendly. By the end, they were notorious for their hedonistic offerings. I'm not even going to tell you what the Romans were doing in the hot springs. When the Vegas of Rome was at its peak, the beaches were said to be crowded with people in various states of drunkenness. Famous philosopher Seneca once wrote that Baiae should be avoided due to its vice and sin. Then it was destroyed. It all began with the fall of the Roman Empire. As Rome grew weaker and weaker, Baiae was attacked by more and more armies. In the 8th century AD, it was utterly destroyed by the invading Muslim armies. The city may have survived as a shadow of its former self into modern times if not for what happened in the 16th century. Volcanic activity agitated the land Baiae was sitting on. It shuffled around so much that the whole city ended up slipping into the sea. In modern times, archaeologists have been hard at work trying to recover all of the treasure they can. The latest find is the multicolored marble floor I told you about just a minute ago. The floor is currently in the process of being painstakingly restored. The mosaic was made of marble, shell, glass, and mother of pearl. It would have been set into the floor of a reception room in some rich person's villa. I can't tell you how many people with overflowing pockets walked across this floor in ancient times. Who knows? Julius Caesar may have been one of them. Area 51 underwater. There may be secret underwater bases scattered throughout the world that the general public has no idea about. Forget everything you know of Area 51. The real mystery is at the bottom of the sea. There was research done in 1968 that I don't think many people have ever heard about. In that year, the Stanford Research Institute discussed the possibility of underwater bases around the globe. A study also came out called Feasibility of Manned In-Bottom Bases. Researchers proposed locations where bases could be built. They even came up with plans for how to construct these engineering marvels. In the 1960s, T.G. Warfield and L.R. Parkinson from the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics said that building bases on the ocean floor is technically and economically feasible. They came up with an idea to create test facilities. They even priced everything out, supposing it would cost around $500 million over 15 years. Interest in underwater bases never fully went away. In 1987, the Deputy Director of Engineering and Construction for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers brought it up. He called for the creation of secret bases that could be protected deep beneath the ocean. So, do these bases exist? Did the U.S. ever go through with plans to build sunken facilities? In 2014, something very unusual was discovered off the coast of Malibu. Near Point Dume, satellite images revealed a bizarre undersea structure that looked suspiciously like a base. It was such a bizarre phenomenon that local news stations were doing stories on it. Nobody knew if it was a natural geological feature, an alien habitat, or one of the US's top secret facilities. It's been 10 years and the strange structure off the coast of Malibu is still a mystery, only now most people have forgotten about it. By the way, I should mention what China's up to. It was reported in 2016 that China had plans to build a space station, only not in space. 10,000 feet beneath the water in the South China Sea, Beijing was plotting to build a manned underwater base. They would use it to hunt for valuable minerals. But could it also have a strategic military purpose? This is the real deal. China had wanted to do it for a long time, but in 2016, they sped up the project. It was mentioned in the 5-year economic plan that China released, and it was also ranked near the top of China's 100 science and technology priorities. An underwater base is their number 2 priority. Chinese leader Xi Jinping talked about it himself. He said that the deep sea contains treasures, and that in order to obtain the treasures, China needs to control key technologies in the deep sea. It's clear as day that China has watery ambitions. But has the project gotten off the ground since it made waves globally in 2016? Nobody has any idea. There hasn't been any word or speculation about an underground base being built in China for almost 10 years. Could they be doing it in secret, or have they given up? The lost shipping stones. 1,500 years ago, a Byzantine merchant ship got a little bit too close to the Sicilian coastline. They were on their way to Syracuse, 25 miles north. But the water was treacherous and they were carrying too much stone. A massive wave lifted the vessel and dropped it onto a reef. The boat smashed to pieces, sending 150 tons of stone sinking to the bottom of the sea. It was a disaster of epic proportions. It was like an Amazon delivery truck crashing and all the packages bursting into flames. Only this was worse. The ship was carrying prefabricated church decorations. It had the columns, capitals, and bases for constructing a church. Churches were big business during the Byzantine Empire. Whoever messed this up likely lost out on future contracts. The stone pieces were never recovered. They remained at the bottom of the Mediterranean for 14 centuries. In 1959, a fisherman hunting cuttlefish saw them for the first time since the Dark Ages. A few years later, German underwater archaeologist Gerhard Kapitan began an investigation of the site. The longest stones are lying across an area about the size of a football field, maybe a little smaller, and they are only under 25 feet of water, meaning they are easy to explore even if you're an amateur diver. After years of research, Gerhard came up with an explanation for the stones. He believed the shipwreck was part of a state-led building campaign launched by Emperor Justinian I. Justinian isn't as famous as Nero or Caligula, but he was a very important figure in history. Today, scholars call him the last Roman. It's a pretty cool nickname, like the last samurai. Justinian ruled during the shift of power from Rome to the new capital of Constantinople. He was the last really Roman-feeling ruler. After him, emperors were distinctly Byzantine. The mysterious shipping stones at the bottom of the sea were likely commissioned to build a new state-funded church as part of Justinian's campaign to build new structures in the capital. This was a theory up until very recently. Stanford University archaeologist Justin Leadwire recently completed a new study of the shipwrecked stones. Justin doesn't think they had anything to do with Emperor Justinian, but I wonder if archaeologist Justin might have been named after him. Anyway, Justin said that merchants were shipping top-quality decorative stones across the Mediterranean since the Bronze Age. Justin suspects the stones weren't ordered by the emperor himself, but by other people involved in the Byzantines' growing economy of building new stuff. There is a rationale behind Justin's theory. He said that by the time Justinian took power in 527, the Roman Empire had been torn asunder. Its western provinces were cut up and divided amongst the Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Visigoths. The massive trading network that had supplied materials like marble to the far corners of the empire no longer existed. Justinian was trying to recapture parts of the old Roman Empire. His armies went into North Africa, Italy, and some areas of Spain. Part of Justinian's building campaign was to reinforce old fortifications and build new churches in reconquered lands, thereby consolidating the empire. The church aspect was very clever on his part. Justinian wanted to promote his vision of Christianity. By uniting the Byzantine Empire under Christ, Justinian hoped to stitch together the old empire. The tooth of the sea monster in the Titanic? Did you know the average shark loses up to 40,000 teeth during their lifetime? It's true. Any shark will tell you. It's also true for the sharks of prehistory, like everybody's favorite sea monster, the megalodon. The greatest predator that ever swam the seas lost tens of thousands of teeth during its life. And for that reason, finding a megalodon's tooth isn't particularly rare. They've been found in rivers and streams around the globe, at the beach, in the sand, all over the place. Plenty of people find these big, jagged teeth every year, but never in the deep sea. There has never before been a fossilized megalodon tooth discovered deep in the ocean. And definitely never before in the wreckage of the Titanic. Until now. Move over, old lady from the Titanic with her necklace. The coolest thing ever found at the Titanic now is a necklace made from megalodon teeth. The story behind its discovery is stranger than fiction. Thankfully, for everyone who likes swimming at the beach, the megalodon went extinct between 3 and 4 million years ago. But before that, they dominated the oceans of the world for almost 20 million years. That's a lot of years and a lot of teeth shed. 40,000 per year per shark for 20 million years. You have to think there are likely billions of them on the ocean floor, but you can't just wander around picking them up unless you have some sort of Iron Man suit. That's why most megalodon teeth are found in shallow water or on the shore. So what was a megalodon shark tooth necklace doing in the Titanic? The deep water investigation company known as Magellan performed a digital scan of the Titanic. The scientists at Magellan identified a necklace with a prehistoric shark tooth on it. It's unclear who the necklace belonged to, but it must have been owned by one of the passengers. The underwater scan of the Titanic was the biggest in history. Scientists mapped almost the entirety of the 3-square-mile debris field at the bottom of the ocean. The pieces of the ship, passengers' luggage, everything is strewn across the ocean floor. It looks like somebody flipped the boat upside down and shook everything out of its pockets. This major discovery was in May of 2023. far as I know, nobody's managed to recover the Megalodon necklace from the Titanic. A few months later, in late December, scientists found another Megalodon tooth in the deep ocean. But this one wasn't in the Titanic. It was found by a team of deep-sea divers lodged in the seabed about 1.9 miles beneath the ocean. It wasn't in the Atlantic, it was the Pacific. The fossilized Megalodon tooth was discovered using an underwater robot known as an ROV, or remotely operated vehicle. The single tooth is stuck in the surface of an underwater mountain. It was like finding a shark tooth on a sunken Everest. Scientists have already dated the enormous tooth at 3.5 million years old. Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Dwarka. The mythical city of Dwarka has been detailed in legends for at least 9,000 years. It's supposedly the greatest city in the world of Hinduism, founded by none other than Krishna himself. Even the name of the city, Dwarka, translates to gateway to heaven. In both the myths and the Mahabharata, which is the primary sacred Hindu text, the city is described as a place of wonder. It's said that it had many beautiful palaces constructed out of pure crystal and silver and decorated with shining emeralds. There were giant artificial lakes, roads leading through the city, and massive residential areas. However, it's a little hard to believe that such a city could have existed in India 9,000 years ago, long before even the Sumerian civilization of Mesopotamia came around. The truth is that even though archaeologists did indeed find the remains of a sunken city off the coast of the modern city of Dwarka, they probably aren't more than 3,000 or 3,500 years old. Still, pretty old. The ruins were uncovered in the Gulf of Cambay, suggesting there was a city there submerged by some kind of cataclysmic event. However, the stones haven't technically been dated. Researchers have only dated artifacts, things like ceramic ware that had been found in the sediment. These artifacts showed the city going back to around 900 BC. Experts believe it was still a holy city, but probably not built by an actual Hindu god. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Lost town of Mardale. There is a lost village, a tiny hamlet only visible when the water level drops, hidden underneath the Haweswater Reservoir in England. It's the town of Mardale, which was submerged back in the 1930s when the water level of the reservoir was artificially raised by about 95 feet. The reservoir has been used to serve Manchester and the surrounding area for the last 90 years. But back in the 30s, the villagers were pretty unhappy to be kicked out of their homes. Hundreds of villagers were forcibly evicted in order to make way for the area to flood. Most of their houses were blown apart by royal engineers who used the structures for demolition practice. What was once a beautiful and picturesque town remains completely hidden most of the time. However, the ruins of Mardale village can be seen when the water level in the reservoir drops any lower than 50%. But you'd really have to look hard to realize you were staring at a lost city. The buildings have been ultimately destroyed, with the only evidence of human habitation being the squat foundations that remain of the buildings. You can see the outlines of the structures long destroyed, but that is all that is left. Sunken city of Teina. Underneath the surface of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, archaeologist Christophe Delaire of Belgium discovered the remains of an ancient civilization. With information given to him by the locals, he and his team have so far discovered over 24 submerged archaeological sites, hiding underneath the shimmering blue water of the lake. The most important of these sites, at least according to the Bolivian government, is Santiago de Ojelaya. This is where the government is hoping to build a museum both on land and in the water. That way tourists can see the ruins both at the edge of the lake and the ruins beneath the lake. Pretty cool, huh? The ruins once belonged to the pre-Inca civilization known as the Tiwanaku. The Tiwanaku began settling around Lake Titicaca in 2000 BC and continued to thrive there for 3,000 years. They reached their height around the year 500, with shocking advances in architecture and science. They built gateways that some believe were used as portals to other places in time and space. They also crafted amazing artifacts from gold and spread across the Andes Mountains into Argentina, Peru, and even Chile. But they always stuck quite close to Lake Titicaca, where they believed civilization originated. It was part of their mythology that the first human had risen from the lake, and so it only made sense to keep it as their political and cultural center. The sunken cities and temples found beneath the lake likely were flooded when its water levels rose about 1,000 years ago, right around the time the Tiwanaku vanished. The Kekova ruins. Kova Island in Turkey was home to the very first democratic federation in the world. This was before the Ottoman, the Byzantine, and even the Roman empires. It was around 2000 BC when the Lycians created the first peaceful federation of city-states the world had ever known. The Lycians were a happy and prosperous people, and they built a city on Kova Island specifically for trading at sea. It was called Simena, and it lasted for about 2200 years before it was hit by a series of earthquakes in the 2nd century AD and sunk. It really did happen that fast. The people of Simena had enjoyed centuries of prosperous trading and had been building a beautiful city on the island. Then the ground shook and all their great works of architecture fell into the water. But the city is at least still visible today. The shattered rooftops of ancient structures looking almost like the crests of coral reefs in the clear waters of the Mediterranean. There's a broken shipyard here, the foundations of old public houses, and scattered pieces of pottery on the sea floor. There are also Lycian tombs scattered throughout the area, both underwater and on the island. There's even one particularly striking set of stone stairs descending straight into the water, where the city had once been. The entire island today is completely abandoned. There is not a single person living here, and only a handful of goats who reside in the above-ground ruins. The whole place is a protected area, a UNESCO candidate, and a forbidden zone. You're not even allowed to dive or snorkel in the area around the sunken city without express permission from the authorities. In 2017, the Turkish government thought to potentially open the ruins for exploration to draw in tourism. Would you make the journey to visit this underwater sunken city? Let me know in the comments below. Dunwich by the sea. Dunwich was a thriving port city in the 13th century with a somewhat legendary status. In fact, Dunwich remains a city on Suffolk's coast in the UK. Quite tiny today, there are only about 200 people living in it, a single road, one pub, the ruins of a monastery, and a local museum. But in the Middle Ages, Dunwich was quite a bit larger. It was actually huge, with a bustling port getting fat on fishing and trading. There was even a Greyfriars monastery established by Franciscan monks in the 1250s. The town was getting bigger and bigger, and it was spreading from the beach higher up the shore. But no amount of prosperity could save Dunwich from what came next. In the year 1286, a massive storm battered the English coastline, sweeping away the newly constructed monastery and literally sucking people's houses into the ocean. When the storm had settled and the people were able to look at the damage, they saw that their city was entirely gone. It's now sitting underneath the water, about half a mile from the coastline. Starting in the 1960s, fishermen began to catch their nets on mysterious structures underneath the water. When archaeologists went in to see what was going on, they laid eyes on Dunwich's shattered churches for the first time in over 700 years. Which city do you think is next to be swept out to sea, and how soon do you think it could happen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. The Wickedest City. Port Royal was once called the wickedest city in the world, yet it's hard to see that when looking at Port Royal today. It's a small and rather sleepy fishing village in Jamaica, located just at the mouth of Kingston Harbor. But in the 17th century, Port Royal was the very real pirate capital of the Caribbean. It was a paradise for pirates, a port city of bars and brothels where scurvy-stricken sea dogs could indulge in all kinds of sins and vices. In the 1660s, historian Charles Leslie wrote that wine and women drained pirates of their accumulated bounty so quickly that some were reduced to beggars in a single night. Pirates used their booty to purchase mass quantities of wine and take women back to their pirate lairs. Alas, the glory of Port Royal did not last as long as the pirates would have liked. It was on June 7, 1692, that an earthquake shook the Caribbean to its core. The quake was so ferocious that it caused a tsunami that came out of the water and dragged Port Royal into the sea. Roughly 2,000 people were killed, and the entire city was sunk in a matter of minutes. All these years later, the ruins are still out there, just a few feet below the surface. A prehistoric ghost town. The English Channel is one of the most difficult places for diving. It's a huge stretch of water between the island of Great Britain and mainland Europe. It has powerful tides and extremely cold waters that make it hazardous even for the most professional divers. For these reasons, it's been difficult for marine archaeologists to reach the bottom of the seabed and see what's hiding there. Why would anyone want to go to the bottom of the channel? Because 8,000 years ago, there was no water here. The United Kingdom was still linked to Europe by a large patch of land. It wasn't until the glaciers began melting that the sea levels rose enough to turn the UK into an island. Back when this was still above water, people actually lived here. There were settlements throughout the entire region. As the water started moving in, people were forced either east or west. Some people settled in Britain, some people in France. In the 1990s, the first evidence of these prehistoric settlements was discovered by divers carrying out routine surveys. They noticed a lobster cleaning out its burrow, moving pieces of worked flint out of the sediment. Over the last 20 years, several different expeditions have gone to the bottom of the channel in search of lost settlements. And while they haven't found any towering cities under the water, they have found evidence of towns and villages. Most recently, the Maritime Archaeological Trust used new technology to scan the bottom of the channel, finding old pieces of timber and layers of wooden foundations, the ruins of prehistoric towns. We don't know how many are down there in the dark, and most of whatever the prehistoric people built is long gone. However, there are still vague traces of homes sitting on the bottom of the English Channel, all of them over 8,000 years old. Phanagoria. Phanagoria was once the biggest ancient Greek city situated on the Taman Peninsula, a major emporium for the traffic moving between the Maeotian marshes and the southern region of the Caucasus. For those of you unfamiliar with the region, it's in the western part of Russia on the edge of the Black Sea. The city was originally founded in 543 by colonists fleeing devastation at the hands of Persia's Cyrus the Great. After a series of wars and shifts in power, the town allied with the Roman Republic. Since they had remained loyal to Rome, when the Romans began to take over the area, the people of Phanagoria were allowed to maintain themselves with a greater level of autonomy than most other conquered cities. They remained a powerful player in the region up until the 4th century AD, when the Roman Empire fell and the Huns burned the city to the ground. In the Middle Ages, the town bounced back after being utterly decimated by barbarians. It became the capital of Old Great Bulgaria in 632, then was absorbed into the Byzantine Empire. By the 10th century, it was invaded by the Rus, and this time never bounced back. Even though much of the ancient city lies in ruins on the edge of the Black Sea, a large part of it is also in ruins underneath the Black Sea. About 1/3 of the city has fallen victim to rising water levels, with a huge portion of its ancient temples and buildings submerged under several feet of water. Olus. Olus was yet another coastal city in ancient Greece that flourished because of its easy access to trade networks. It was a city positioned smartly at a maritime crossroads, which connected northern Crete with other Aegean islands in the Mediterranean. Like so many other coastal cities in Greece, Olus was plunged into the water when a great earthquake shook the region in the 2nd century AD, yet not all its history was lost. Recent underwater surveys have revealed the remains of broken structures, roads winding across the seabed, and the foundations of huge public buildings. Archaeologists have found defensive walls and towers, which likely protected the harbor city from invasion by the sea. They have also found ancient coins dating back to 330 BC, coins decorated with the heads of gods like Zeus. What's really remarkable about Olus is that the whole thing ended up being underwater. There are sunken cemeteries, marble statues buried under sediment, and even ancient tombs that are pretty much inaccessible because they are so deep underwater. Fabbriche di Caregine. Fabbriche di Caregine isn't exactly Atlantis, but it's still one of the most mysterious lost sunken cities in the world. It's a submerged town from the medieval days, hidden beneath the water of Lago di Vagli in Tuscany. The lake is an artificial body of water, the result of flooding in 1953 when a dam was built nearby. Creating the dam meant the whole valley was going to need to be flooded, which would completely destroy the city that had been standing there since the 1200s. It was actually pretty tragic, especially from a historical standpoint. The original town had been thriving for over 800 years. Whereas many of these small Italian settlements vanished in the wake of the modern world, this one survived deep into the 20th century. Even more fascinating is that the town was occupied mainly by blacksmiths and farmers. They still practiced many old ways of life, with the 146 inhabitants farming the land, building, and surviving as if they were still living in the Middle Ages. But the flood destroyed their way of life. As the basin slowly filled, the village was lost under the water. It's still down there, and it occasionally rears its medieval head when water levels drop, but it's never going to be inhabited ever again. Thanks for watching! Which of these incredible sunken cities would you love to explore on a scuba trip? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more incredible finds. Bye!